Elamite. Probably not a language you've heard of before. Historically thought to be related to Dravidian, Elamite was spoken in present-day southwestern Iran from the 3rd millennium BC all the way up to 300 BC, when it mysteriously vanished from all records. Who were these mysterious people? What was their language like? And how comes they just disappeared? Welcome to the Milu project, and today we'll be exploring the Elamite language. Centered around the city of Susa, the Elamites were an ancient Mesopotamian people who, unlike their mainly Indo-European and Semitic-speaking neighbours, spoke a language isolate. Because the eastern extent of the Elamite civilization is unknown, many have speculated a connection between Elamite and Dravidian. Although plausible, this hasn't been proven. But what was the language like? Initially, the Elamites used the Proto-Elamite script, which, although currently undeciphered, has been determined as having developed from the same source as Sumerian Proto-Cuneiform. Then, during the last quarter of the 3rd millennium BC, Linear Elamite, a logographic system, was briefly used. For the majority of their existence though, the Elamites used Elamite cuneiform, a system developed from Akkadian cuneiform. This consisted of syllabic signs, peppered with a few Akkadian logograms. Unlike many Mesopotamian languages, there existed determinatives, which qualified the semantic class of the words they preceded. In terms of phonology, this is what we've been able to reconstruct. These being the consonants, and these the vowels. It's worth mentioning that due to the technical limitations of cuneiform, this is all quite speculative. In terms of grammar, Elamite was an agglutinative language, with most roots being modified by several suffixes, although it had fewer morphemes per word than languages like Sumerian and Hurrian. The language had SOV word order, with indirect objects preceding direct objects, as shown here. However, in later periods, sometimes the verb wasn't final. Elamite also had a mainly nominative-accusative alignment, in contrast to the ergative-absolutive languages, which were prevalent in the region. The language had two grammatical genders, the animate and inanimate. In Elamite, with animate nouns, there's a distinction between the first person, second person, and third person, with the third person also distinguishing between animate and inanimate. And pronouns could be demonstrative, personal, possessive, relative, indefinite, reflexive, or resumptive. Verbs were formed from a root, which could function like an infinitive, and endings, and belong to 3 conjugations, most verbs existing in all of them. Verbs conjugated in the first conjugation usually corresponded to transitive verbs in the past tense, with a neutral aspect and in the active voice, as shown here. Whilst the second and third conjugations usually meant a participle construction, with intransitive and passive verbs belonging to the second conjugation, and verbs which weren't in the past tense were all put into the third conjugation, regardless of their transitivity. In Elamite, there existed the following verbal moods. There's so much more insanely complicated grammary stuff about Elamite, so I'll link an article in the description if you'd like to read more. The Persians' invasion in 550 BC ushered in the emergence of Achaemenid Elamite, the best attested form of the language. The Persians used the language for both official inscriptions and administrative record keeping, and their influence led to more flexible word order, more logograms in inscriptions, and the H sound no longer being written. And even after the Persians' empire subsided, there's evidence the Elamite lived on in the form of the Khuzi dialect, all the way up to the 11th century AD. Anyway, that's all for this week. If you found this information informative, consider leaving a like, subscribe, and don't forget to tune in for next week's episode.